Okay, I guess we can get started. This is Bob Coppage with Simplex-IT. I'd like to welcome you all to our second of the monthly webinars dealing with project management. As you may or may not know, Simplex-IT is in the process of starting up a new practice that deals with project management, not from a we actually do the project management, but we mentor, tutor, support project managers, specifically in this small medium market, and especially using online tools, really surrounding around the Microsoft Project Online, and all that good fun stuff. And Patty Smirk will be the presenter because she knows this stuff a lot better than I do. So, for those of you who aren't aware, Patty, we can go to the next one. I've got me a clicker here. For those of you who don't know, Simplex-IT, we now have three practices. Our primary practice has always been that we are the IT for small, medium businesses through the managed service model. And we've got all these logos and probably other ones we can put on as well, should we ever decide to have a race car. So, okay, next. And again, we ask the question, should we be your IT department? I see we've got a couple of our clients on board on this webinar, so hopefully the answer from them is yes. But in any case, these are some questions to ask yourself whether we should be involved. Yay. Go on to the next. And this talks a little bit about the two new practices. Talk briefly about Simplex-PM, and then we also have Simplex-DBA, and we're actually going to be starting our monthly webinar on that in January with Doug Tombo giving that information. Okay, and we're kind of excited about that. And one of the things, you hear about that whole question about what makes your organization different and all that kind of fun stuff. And one of the big things we believe in is we believe in sharing our knowledge and sharing our experience. And we right now have two monthly webinars, this one, which is the project management, which this is our second one, and we just had our 13th office webinar we do each month as well. And that's continuing, and this hasn't been updated to have the database or the data management webinars, but we're going to have a third webinar starting every month in January, and that's in addition to our monthly lunch and hour. So we've got a lot of it, and these are all, for the most part, we try to demonstrate our knowledge and our willingness to share the knowledge in hopes that companies realize that we can be a great partner for them. And those are the topics that we have coming up over the next 3 months. Okay. And with that, you get to the best part of the presentation, the part where I shut up. Patty, you can take over from here.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This webinar is going to be a little bit different than some of the ones that you may have heard from Simplex in the past, and especially from the project management one that we did last month. The reason why it's a little bit different is we thought we would take a step back away from the technology and really talk about just the basics of project management. Project management in general is widely popular in large-scale businesses. In some of the small to mid-size, it's not quite so popular. However, still a lot of the same concepts, methodologies, backbones of project management can still be useful. So the purpose of today is to just provide you with sort of an overview of all of the various aspects of project management. But one thing that I really want to focus on in the very beginning is to stress that not everything that you see in this webinar will be something that you'll want to use on every project. So part of what I want to do today is to just present everything to you, and then you can sort of decide which pieces might be valuable for you to use. And it might not be the same for every project. So there may be some projects where you'll have a risk management component. There may be some where you'll have a communication plan or a change management plan, and there'll be some that you might not see value in that. So I always try to say, use what's going to bring you value. We don't want to spend more time managing our project than actually doing the project. So again, some of this you'll see and you'll think, no, I'll never use that. And then others you may see and think, oh, that's great. I want to know more about that. Okay. So basically, I just want to start off in the very beginning with what is project management. And the answer to that kind of is a circular answer because it starts off with, well, what is a project? So specifically, a project is a temporary endeavor designed to produce a unique product, service, or result. So something that's temporary and something that's going to give you a result that you've not had previously. For instance, a new building, a piece of software, an upgraded network. So something that's temporary. It has a start date, it has a stop date. It's not an ongoing operational activity within your organization. There are some gray areas here, increasing customer service feedback, might be sort of a gray area because you think, well, I want to do that all the time. But we can really think about certain products and maybe deliveries that we have that really focus on that to be truly a project. So it's temporary and it has a unique result. So project management then is the management of projects. So managing these temporary endeavors that produce unique results. It's gotten widely popular in the last several years, probably the last 20 to 30 years. It's gotten more and more popular. We see it across multiple areas of business. So, you can walk into an insurance firm or a manufacturing company or a banking industry and see project management being used. Like I said, it's very popular in larger organizations because their large projects are large investments for them. However, I've seen it done on the smaller scale as well, and works very successfully on both. One of the things that I want to talk about is a Project Management Institute. If you're interested at all in project management for your organization or project management as a career, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm more than willing to talk about this stuff all day long. It's what I love. But Project Management Institute is a great resource. These are the folks that set the standards for project management. They're also the folks that certify project managers. So there's a certification called PMP, and it's granted through PMI. So it's the Project Management Professional that Project Management Institute certifies. And this is sort of the CPA of accounting, if you will, for project managers. So they have a great website, pmi.org. If you're interested in learning anything about project management as a career, check them out. Or like I said, you can always contact me directly, and I'm more than happy to talk about all this stuff with anybody. So let's take a step back. We've talked a little bit about, what's a project and who tells us what a project is, which is PMI. But let's take a little step back. So basically, project management falls into 5 what's called process groups. So whenever you're looking at a project, and think about maybe something that you're looking at in your real life, whether it's work or personal. You're building an addition onto your house, or you're looking to upgrade your new server in the server room. It can be divided into 5 groups. So initiating the project, planning the project, executing it, monitoring and control, and closing. So those are the 5 groups, and I'll dive into these 5 groups in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But also, project management draws on 10 kind of key areas that a lot of management in general draws on. But the knowledge that project managers really use on a day-to-day basis come from, cost, human resources, scope, quality, communication is huge. So we really focus on these 10 areas. And if you're interested, especially in project management as a certification, there's a lot of these knowledge area questions on the certification. So like I said, all management is concerned with these issues, obviously. I shouldn't say issues, but concerned with these focus areas. So project management brings, a unique focus shaped by goals, resources, and the schedule of the projects. It's recognized as a strategic organizational competence. It's a subject for training and education, and it's recognized as a, in my opinion, great career path. So of course I'm going to say that because that's my career path. That's what I do, and I love it. So let's take a step back and talk about the process groups. Okay. So the first process group we have is initiating. I just want to do, again, just a high-level overview of some of these. So the initiating process group involves the processes, activities, skills that are needed to effectively define the beginning of a project. So here you would set all the permits, authorizations, work orders, anything initially before you even start planning the project. So setting clear phases of work to be completed, initializing the teams, having a budget in place if possible before you start are really vital for this initiating process group. And there's two main deliverables from this group that you're looking at. One would be the project charter and one would be the stakeholders. And I'll probably throw a lot of terms at you that you may not be familiar with if you've not worked in a formal project management environment. And that's fine. One of the things that we do is either, I'm sorry, somebody doesn't have their microphone on mute. If you wouldn't mind muting for us so that we don't have any background noise. So one of the first things that we do in the initiating phase is we talk about our project charter. And our project charter is basically, it's just an overview of the project. You know, what are we going to do? And it sounds very simple, but I will say I think this is one of the most important components of project management. If everybody that's working on the project isn't on the same page, then it just creates chaos in the long run. So this is, when I say everybody, this is everybody from the project manager to the folks working on tasks, to the folks paying for you to do this project, whether that is your customer or a vendor or somebody down the hall that you work with. So everybody really needs to be on the same page. And the nice thing about creating a formal project charter is you literally spell out what you're going to do in this project. So even if you're just, even if your project team is just a few people, sometimes it's nice to really sit down and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Are you thinking the same thing? And sort of get everybody, like I said, on the same page. The other thing is identifying who's going to be affected by this project. So, who are your stakeholders? Who are people that might use this project deliverable that you're creating? Who might be affected by it? If you're creating, let's say, a new piece of software for your company, your stakeholders might be the users, but it also might be people in other departments that maybe need to interface with that piece of software. So really sitting down and thinking about, okay, who am I going to affect with this end result is key in project management. The next process group is planning. So project managers love to plan. What's that saying? Plan to fail or fail to plan. So planning is, we spend a lot of time in this process group. So the planning phase really just sets forth the processes that are needed to define the scope of the project. What are we going to do? Here we set strategic plans to maximize the workflow. We begin to assemble priority lists. We plan teams and team needs. We also talk about further narrowing down clarification of project goals if we haven't done that in the charter or in the initiating phase yet. Some of our deliverables would include a project management plan. So this is just a detailed plan, detailed report showing exactly what's going to happen throughout the project. We would collect requirements. So these are from our customers or stakeholders. What's their requirement of this project? We would define scope. Scope is huge in project management. Scope says what we're going to do. So knowing what you're doing in a project and knowing what you're not doing in a project really help keep the project on track budget-wise and schedule-wise. It's very easy, especially in software development, to think in the middle of a project, oh, I'll just do this one extra menu or I'll do this one extra screen, and that might not be part of the scope. And if you do these extra work packages, then sometimes that will throw your budget or your schedule off from what you had originally projected. So not to say that that extra work shouldn't be done, but it should always be negotiated with everybody on the project to make sure everybody's on the same page. There may be a reason why that wasn't included in the project charter. So in the planning phase, we also create the work breakdown structure. So this is basically, what are we going to do? These are the work packages. What needs to be done in this project? Okay. We also create a schedule. So we define activities And that sounds simple enough. We just say, okay, what are we going to do? What needs to be done in this project? Sometimes project managers know that off the top of their heads, and sometimes they need to reach out to the subject matter experts, the folks actually working on the tasks, to get that information. So depending on your team and your project will determine where you get that information. So you define what needs to be done. You sequence them. So, okay, what needs to be done first? What needs to be done after that? What's dependent on these other tasks? Who's going to do them? So your resources, and then how long are these things going to take? So all of that sort of happens together. And then that all feeds into your schedule that you're developing. So at the end of your schedule development, you should know exactly which tasks need to be done, how long they're going to take, in what order they need to be done, and who's going to do them. In addition to the project schedule, we also, in the planning phase, estimate costs. So that kind of goes along with the project schedule, because a lot of tasks are directly associated with the amount of time that goes into doing that task. So it's where we get our cost, is the time. This also helps us determine our budget. So sometimes it's hard to know your budget before you know what you're doing in your project, before you know what tasks need to be done and how long they're going to take. So we plan quality. We develop an HR plan. We can plan communications. We can also plan risk management. We can also create risk management plans, identify risks, and plan procurements. So again, keep in mind, a lot of these things are common things that you would create in a project, but might not be applicable for every single project. If you're working on a small project, let's say, you might not need to develop an HR plan, or you might not need a budget. Well, budget is probably a rough one to not use, but in some cases, there are some projects where you just have to do it, and you may not have a strict budget that you have to abide by. So again, take from this the pieces that bring you value in your project. The next process group is executing. And this is kind of the fun one, because this is the one where all the stuff happens. So the executing phase involves managing teams effectively, while sort of orchestrating the timeline expectations and reaching your goals. So in this area, project managers, use a lot of skills to demonstrate high degree of organization and communication, sort of keeping everybody on the same page. Here we address concerns with other folks on the project team. We may need to negotiate project scope. Maybe something came up that we weren't aware of previously, so we need to address that. Okay, are we going to do this work? And if so, what's going to give? Are we going to bring on some more people and increase the budget, or are we going to maybe bump out the deadline date and increase the time? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. Okay. So here we direct and manage project execution, like I said. We perform quality assurance. We acquire the project team that we had talked about in the previous phase, and develop the team. We also manage the project team. We distribute information that sort of goes hand in hand with communication, manage stakeholder expectations, and then conduct procurements if necessary. The next phase is monitoring and controlling. So in this phase, this is where we might process change orders if there's a change to the project. We might address ongoing budget considerations, maybe work through any unforeseen circumstances that have come up, maybe anything that's going to affect the team's ability to meet the initial expectations or goals. So here we, project managers, we keep the momentum moving forward. We guard against any scope creep. That's when you start doing extra work that's not in the project scope. We guard against project stalling. Sometimes that's easy to do when we have competing priorities and your project is at risk of stalling out. So we actively monitor progress and use forecasting techniques to determine our estimate at completion. In this phase, like I said, we monitor and control project work. We talk about change control. We verify the scope, always keeping an eye on the scope and negotiating if we need to change that at all, and control the schedule. We control costs, perform quality control, report performance. This is huge for schedulers and project managers for communicating outside of their organization or outside of their project team. So reporting is huge, and that's one of the things that we'll talk about in next month's webinar when we go back to a more focus on more of the technology, and I'll show you a little bit about some of the reports that Microsoft Project and Project Online can create for you. So here we monitor and control risks. If any risks that we identified in the previous phase have now become issues, we talk about here how to manage those. And then, of course, administer procurements in this phase as well. The last phase is the closing phase. And this is the one that's the most fun, I think, but always the one that is overlooked, because sometimes when the work is done, we just want to move on to the next project. And that's great, but there are some things in the closing phase that really bring a lot of value to not only the project, but also the organization moving forward. So things like lessons learned that you can really use in other projects. So bringing the project to a successful close on time, within budget, that's great. So some of the things that we do at project closeout is, finalize all activities, any procurements that we need to close out, we do that. We do a post review. This is usually where I like to capture lessons learned. And then we celebrate. So I don't think there's any explanation needed there. Sometimes it's just a fun lunch or anything that your team enjoys doing to say, hey, we finished this project and this is what went well and this is what didn't go so well, and let's just celebrate that. So I think that's always fun to do at the end of a project. Okay, as I was putting these slides together, some things kept popping up, and I didn't want to put a whole lot into this 101 presentation, but there were a few key project management concepts that kept coming to mind. So I do want to mention those, and we do still have a few minutes, so I'd like to go over those. And they're what you see on the screen here: progressive elaboration, estimating, triple constraint, critical path, and reporting. So probably some new terms to you, but I wanted to talk about these because they are so important in project management. The first one being progressive elaboration, and I hear this all the time. It's just basically a fancy word for, getting more detail. A lot of times when we start a project, you may not know the details of what a specific work package entails. You might not have the requirements from your resources, or they might change. There might be some gray area, and I hear this all the time. Well, Patty, I can't create a schedule that has specific tasks in it because I don't know exactly what we're doing. And that's okay, as long as you know it before you do it. So progressive elaboration is just a fancy word for the iterative process of getting more detail. You don't have to know. If you're managing a large project that's 2 years long, 3 years long, you're not going to know the details of those last few phases when you're planning. And that's okay. Put in what you know, but then don't just put it on a shelf. Constantly revisit that, and whenever you do have more information or more detail, then put that in the schedule and put that in the plan and update everybody as needed. Another concept that came to mind was estimating. So one of the things that always comes to mind when I'm creating a project schedule and I'm working with my project team is the estimates that I'm given by my subject matter experts. So I may go to a developer and say, okay, I need this work done, and I give them all the details, everything I have, and they give me back an estimate of how long they think it's going to take. Getting true, reliable estimates is profoundly important. If you just say, oh yeah, it'll take me 6 months, but you really don't know if it'll take 6 months. It could take 2 months, but you just want to pad the schedule a little bit. You're not going to get good variances, and then you're not going to have good lessons learned and future information to use in the future. So I always say, use good, true estimates. There's a variety of different estimating techniques available that we can talk about in the future. If you're interested, let me know. But something like worst case, best case, find the middle of the road sort of thing. And I'm not to say don't add in any extra time within your schedule, that's always great. Maybe add a little 10% variance around some project tasks that you feel you might need it. But that's not to say that you should have, a 500% increase on every single task just because, you want to make sure you have enough time for everything. It's a lot of people's first initial thoughts, but, if you have all of your tasks clearly defined and a good project schedule, then you shouldn't have to have too much time built in there. So I like to say, maybe a 10% is a nice number. And I don't just say that. Project Management Institute told me to say that, so they're the ones that set those, that governing information. The other thing that's important in project management that we struggle, or I shouldn't say struggle with, but that we come back to all the time is the triple constraint. So any project, if you think of a triangle, if you will, any project has a time component, a cost component, and a scope component. And it's almost impossible for one of those to move without affecting the other two. The most common is scope. So scope is what we're going to do in a project, right? So if I'm working on a project and that scope changes, let's say that, somebody adds more work. We have, another screen that we want to add to this program that we're creating. That then we need to adjust our time or cost or both. And that's a key time when I would go back to my project sponsor and say, okay, if you want to do this, that means we need to have some more time to do it or have some more resources, which typically means increasing the cost, or a combination of both. And we talk through sort of those pros and cons and decide what would be best for the project. Another thing is the critical path. The critical path is basically the tasks that, if they were to take longer than what you had estimated, they would interfere with the project finish date. So there may be some slack time in there in the schedule that you could use to extend some tasks, and then there may be some where there isn't any slack time in between. So the critical task is basically your tasks that have to start and finish at a certain time, or else it will affect the project finish date. And then the last key concept that I wanted to mention was project reporting. So project reporting is key when you're communicating to your project team, your stakeholders, your resources, anybody else on your project team. Keeping everybody on the same page prevents people from getting blindsided in the future. I love that saying, bad news doesn't get better with time. So if I see something sort of creeping up and I feel like my schedule is going to be delayed or I'm going to need additional resources, I always like to address that sooner rather than later. And especially try to get buy-in from people on the project team or from my managers. All right, I know we've covered a great deal of information here in this webinar. I would like to thank you for joining me. Hopefully you'll join me again in future months. We'll get back to talking a little bit about Microsoft Project and Project Online and some of the reporting capabilities that we have there next month. Okay. All right, it's about a half an hour. Thank you for spending your time with me. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly or to Simplex-IT. Thank you very much.